Welcome to another MedTech Gurus podcast, where we meet and discuss trending and educational topics that are important to today's medical technology sales and marketing professionals. Now, it doesn't matter if you're new to the space or if you're a seasoned medical sales and marketing professional. You all have come to the right place. You see, the medical technology world is ever-changing, and MedTech Gurus will help you stay up to date by interviewing experts and opinion leaders. Now, we call them gurus, and they will bring you information, techniques, and strategies that are sure to help you enhance your knowledge and help you bring value to your customers and your company. Now, I'm Sylvester Harris, and I'm pleased to introduce your host for MedTech Gurus, Mr. Tom Hickey.
Hey, what's going on out there, Gurus? This is Tom Hickey, host of MedTech Gurus, and welcome to episode number 287. Imagine a future where rural communities have the same access to advanced cardiac diagnostics as major metropolitan hospitals, where early-stage heart disease is caught before it becomes an emergency, and where wearables on your chest do more than just collect data. It helps rewrite your health journey. That future is now. And today's guest, Chris Darland, CEO of PeerBridge Health, is at the heart of it. Chris and his team are bringing next-generation wearable cardiac monitors to life with CoreMDX, an ambulatory ECG system that delivers hospital-grade signal fidelity and real-time insights, all in a user-friendly patch. In this episode, we dive into how PeerBridge is transforming early disease detection, enabling virtual cardiology, and solving the readmission crisis with scalable, affordable technology. We'll also explore how vintage scientific breakthroughs are being reimagined with cutting-edge AI and what it really takes to raise capital in today's medtech landscape. Gurus, you will love this episode, but before we get into the episode, let's thank our sponsor, Accelerant Consulting. Gurus, the U.S. healthcare delivery system is focused on value more than ever. With that, value analysis teams have become increasingly influential in product decision-making. Here's the problem. How do you help your product stand out to the individuals on the value analysis committee? Let's face it, if they have to come back and ask questions, that can set you back months before you get back on their agenda. How much would that cost you? Let the team at Accelerant Consulting help. They can review or even design your value analysis documents, the end result being having a complete document that resonates with the professionals on these teams. Reach out to the experts at Accelerant Consulting today. Check them out at accelerantconsulting.com. That's EXCELERANT consulting.com and do it today. Okay, Gurus, here comes episode number 287. And remember, if you like what you hear, please subscribe, leave a review, and most importantly, tell a friend. Welcome, MedTech Gurus. Today, as I mentioned in the introduction, we have an incredible guest with us. Chris Darland, CEO of PeerBridge Health, is here to discuss how their groundbreaking ambulatory ECG wearables are transforming early disease detection, reducing readmissions, and enabling virtual cardiology. Earlier this month at the HIMSS Global Health Conference, PeerBridge unveiled their next generation of remote cardiac monitoring with the introduction of CoreMDX. CoreMDX represents a complete reimagination of traditional ECG wearable patches, combining best-in-class signal fidelity with real-time multi-lead streaming and connectivity to offer a seamless, cost-effective solution for cardiac care. Hey, Chris, are you ready to be our guru today?
Absolutely am.
Oh, that's great. We're excited to have you. So tell us something fun or interesting about yourself or your family so we can get to know you a little better.
Sure. So it'll probably be in the past when you're listening to this, but tomorrow morning I'm heading to see the Sweet 16 game with my son. It's his birthday and he doesn't know yet.
Oh, really?
So we'll find out in the morning. We're getting out of school early. We're big Kentucky fans and we get to see Kentucky play Tennessee live. So I am super anxious and should be an awesome time. And either you'll have a disappointed drive home Friday night or a very happy drive home.
Yeah, but you know what? Those are great events. I've been to a couple of them, and it just the spirit of competition and watching those teams play, and all of the emotion and excitement. And he'll have a great time.
Oh yeah, and we hate Tennessee. I live in Nashville, but we're Kentucky through and through. So it's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, I happen to live in Michigan. There's a lot of interesting rivalries here as well. So because of that, well, you guys will have a blast and enjoy it completely. So, Chris, heart failure and other cardiac conditions, really drive high hospital readmission rates, right? So how can at-home hemodynamic monitoring change this dynamic and improve the situation? Can you provide us some insights there?
Yeah, sure. So ultimately, and we'll talk about this later, but ultimately we just need to find heart disease earlier and then we can treat it. You don't end up in the ER in this readmission cycle. But I think what we're missing from the cycle today is, we have fantastic tools in the hospital to manage congestion and improvement in cardiac function or deterioration. But at home, we have, Amazon blood pressure cuffs, and you're asking people to step on a scale, step on and off a scale to see if we're retaining water, and then it's a disaster, and then you're scrambling, and a little bit of panic from the patient's family, of course. So it's really interesting, and we're doing it. And there's a lot of really exciting companies working on this. Is if you can get some of those hospital grade tools, because like trending information isn't really helpful, and kind of consumer based maybe isn't quite there. But if you can measure cardiac output or stroke volume or intracardiac pressures at the same level as you would a cath, an invasive measure in the hospital, then you can get quick snapshots to a hospital system to say, maybe we're going to check in for 5 minutes. It's kind of how we think through it. You sit at your kitchen table, you're out of the hospital for 3 days, wear the device, check in for 5 minutes. If everything's good, perfect. Take it off and continue to live your life. If not, maybe there's some simple drug titration that your cardiologist can do without you having to drive into the hospital and eat up 45 minutes of his or her time for a well visit potentially, or an emergency room, which is even worse. So in my mind, it's really all about how do you make those hospital tools mobile, and it feels like we're super close making that a reality.
It's interesting, and I'm far from an expert in this, but it seems to me that looking at cardiac issues, they somewhat develop slowly, and then there's a big dramatic event, right? So you guys are trying to get ahead of that curve so you can not have that big dramatic event. My path with that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Because the reality is, if you end up, so 4 out of 5 cases of heart failure are still caught in the ER. Well, the reality is that happens when you're 70. It's probably based on decisions from your 30s and 40s that get you there. And the other kind of interesting part of all of this is we actually have the tools to find disease super early, but they're echoes like ultrasounds effectively in the hospital. And they're too expensive that you would never go proactively do echoes on everybody over 50 in the country. So you end up finding it too late or in these emergency situations. So the thought is, if you catch it early, there's actually fantastic generic pharmaceuticals that in asymptomatic heart failure, like stage B, you can live a perfectly happy life. The beauty of cardiology, unlike a field like cancer, is we know how to treat everything. Lots of brilliant cardiologists and brilliant scientists who have essentially figured out how to rebuild a heart from scratch if need be. It's just a matter of finding it. So if you can find it, then you can get it. I think the problem today is finding it requires the hospital, requires hospital tools, requires an echo technician, of which there's a huge shortage. Even echo machines, there's a shortage. So the key is, how do you go get it at high fidelity, so you're not panicking everybody. And importantly, my focus in the company, all my family's from Bullitt County, Kentucky. Like reaching rural community, it has to be really, really cheap, and it has to be local. If you can figure those two out, then I think that's what unlocks finding it early, treating it early, getting rid of the ER visits, which means you get rid of the readmission cycle, and ultimately leave the doctors working on the things that only they can fix, as opposed to what's largely lifestyle disease pounds over 30 years that becomes an emergency.
Yeah. And that kind of leads me to the next question here, because we've talked often on MedTech Gurus with other innovators that, the adoption of new technologies and life-saving diagnostics are sometimes slow in some of the healthcare systems. We touched on it a little bit in terms of the barriers, but, maybe let's build on that. What are some of those barriers for early detection, and how can we overcome them and get a wider adoption? Do you have any insights there for?
I mean, I think the problem right now is a little bit like I mentioned, the tools are very expensive. They're in the hospital, and we have a gigantic cardiologist shortage. The estimates are over 100,000 cardiologist shortage by 2030. So let's say if you are one who has the luxury of time and money that can go see a cardiologist proactively, you're probably still having a 3-month wait to go see them. And then it's the way I picture it is a little bit like a dentist, right? Somebody says, "Hey, Tom, what are you doing September 15th at 3 p.m.?" And you're like, "Okay, sure. Yeah, sign me up. I'll take that appointment." And then it's September 10th. My family's case, you might be offered a double shift, in which case that's a lot of money. Pass up so you do it, or maybe you got the kids that night and you didn't expect to for the afternoon. So you reschedule it and it's another 3 months and another 3 months. So I think it's really tricky for a lot of the population to find time to do it. And unfortunately, a lot of the symptoms end up being kind of old age symptoms. Like if I picture my dad, it's like, well, I had shortness of breath going up the stairs. It's like, well, you're also 70 and you don't eat that healthy. Not really exercising. So maybe there's some things we can do. And then you push it off, right? And it's another year and another year. And he's in the middle, he's in Springfield, Kentucky, the end of a long gravel driveway. So he's not going to proactively go to the university to go see a cardiologist just for a checkup. So there's for sure, it's not like the health system is necessarily failing him completely. He's not interested in going to find it. So it's how do you reach those patients who maybe aren't the ones who are going to proactively deal with the 3-month wait, back meetings. I think that's where we have to reach them. We've got to get to them as opposed to just waiting for them to come to us as the healthcare.
Yeah, that's interesting because I can see that where those types of patients, as you described, are going to be the ones that are showing up in the emergency department, right? Versus those that are active, are probably doing those types of things. So that makes total sense. And then, I was doing some research on PeerBridge, and it's really interesting because we often talk about innovation here at MedTech Gurus, and it's a key in MedTech right now. And I'm just kind of curious, what strategies have helped PeerBridge stay ahead in developing breakthrough solutions? Can you give us some best practices there?
Sure. We actually have a little bit of a unique perspective here, where the way we've built the company is really 3 key components. We have a piece of hardware that was developed 5 or 6 years ago. We think it's the best signal fidelity of anything in the industry. It's an ECG 3-lead ECG patch. And then we apply some signal processing tools that our CTO developed in the 90s for NASA and the Department of Defense. And it's all ultra weak signal processing type approaches in quantum physics, initially for guiding autonomous spacecraft, and the Department of Defense uses it in a few different ways. And then we're using a lot of foundational research from the 50s and 60s as well that says, here's what ECG can tell you about your cardiac function. But as you might imagine, when you do research in a very academic setting, everything is super sterile. And then you get the real world and, maybe it's right, but you can't recreate it. So you don't know if it's right. So what we've done is kind of paired the device and some of the signal processing tools to say, hey, maybe we can kind of recreate this sterile environment. We can get pretty close. And then we're scrubbing through hundreds of research papers that have been collecting dust in library shelves. And maybe it wasn't perfect, but it was 80% right. And when you look across all this technology, you can get there, and then you combine it with machine learning tools that can help you kind of fine tune the variables. Is it this piece of ECG that's more important, or this piece of the lead V2, or is it lead 3? So it's a lot of, and those AI tools, as I described, are like 25 years old. So this isn't necessarily like a LLM of the last 18 months. So it's really just trying to come up with unique applications of things that have existed for quite a long time. In some cases, 50 years, in some cases, 20 years, but using them in a slightly different context. So it's invention, I guess you could say, for sure, in the medical device industry, but it's on the back of a lot of brilliant physicists and scientists over the last 50 years that maybe built it for a different context. But now our CTO is brilliant. His name is Sandy Pilati. I'm very passionate about healthcare. and I'm blessed to have him for sure. Now it's just take it and put it in the healthcare context. We feel like we can unlock quite a bit.
I find that fascinating because for a couple of reasons. But I've got a client that developed a product for positioning of patients in robotic surgery, and the core concept of that came from a paper published in the UK Journal of Anesthesia in 1957, right? And they turned it into a contemporary product. So it fascinates me that, there's a lot of good ideas that sometimes get put on the shelf, but could be, a slightly different spin and repurposed, and now you've got a product, right?
Yeah.
So it sounds like that's what you and your team are doing, at least partially doing.
It's exactly right. I mean, even the design of the device that I have right here is based off something called the principle called Einthoven's triangle. He won the Nobel Prize in 1924, so he's 101 years old. But his principle and some of the early research that he did led to this design, which allows us to derive 12 leads. I mean, it's all, we didn't create anything out of thin air. Sandy made us. We didn't create anything out of thin air, but it's just finding the right pieces that might work. It's been super helpful for us.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I would think it probably helps too in terms of, just a little bit of speed to market too, right?
Yeah, for sure. Because I'll tell you what, in our discussion, so the first work we're doing with the FDA is measuring ejection fraction. So the amount of blood you're pumping out of your left ventricle on every beat at the percentage. And as we went to talk to the FDA about it, so we're comparing ourselves to an echo. So patients come in and get an echo, and then we tell them to wear the device for 30 minutes, and we see if how accurate we are. Our ability with the FDA to explain in physics terms how we were doing what we were doing, as opposed to I think what gets tricky is a lot of people use today AI like deep learning models. So you're throwing terabytes of data into a machine, and the machine will for sure find a correlation. It's quite good at it. But whether that correlation holds outside of the training population is to date has proven to be quite brittle in healthcare. So then the real world, it doesn't really work. So us being able to point to in this case, 30, 40 years of research for why we came to the conclusion and show them feasibility data for here's how it works and here's how it worked in 35 patients, I think went a long way in getting their comfort in our trial design, our final pivotal trial design. And for sure, commercially, being able to explain to a clinician why we came to why the machine landed on this patient has heart failure or this patient has hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, whatever it may be, I think has resonated quite a bit too, because as you imagine, 15 years of education and hundreds of thousands of dollars, I think cardiologists are generally heroes in a lot of sense. So they don't want a black box telling them how to do their job. But if we can be a tool and explain, like, here's what we saw in 4 to 5 minutes of data that led us to this conclusion, then you, the cardiologist, you go figure out how to help the patient. We trust you there, but can we give you some shortcuts? And I think there's some confidence there that we can explain.
I would also think that, correct me if I'm wrong, but it would seem to me that with some of the earlier detection that you guys can do, you might be able to enhance some of their practice by getting patients in to see them earlier than they might normally have had, and thus can do some more work with the patient along their lifespan. I have done the right path there.
That's exactly right. So my kind of idyllic view is find disease before you need any kind of invasive intervention at all. And you can get in front of it, and lifestyle changes can help. But the reality is metabolic disease kind of leads you down this path. Mm-hmm. So then it's, in the short, the next 10 to 15 years, how do you avoid the ER visit? In which case it's my dad will be patient number one. So I'll tell you, we'll do a follow-up at some point. I'll tell you how it goes, but he wears it. And this is the brilliance of a lot of the cardiology space today. If there's something wrong, aortic stenosis or a pacing problem, whatever it may be, they know how to fix it for sure. And then you get a shortcut with the cardiologist at the University of Kentucky that when he shows up, I need you to be in the hospital to see a cardiologist, hopefully not an emergency, but like we see something. The cardiologist doesn't spend the first visit asking him how he's feeling and tell me about your symptoms and tell me about your diet, and then scheduling an echo and scheduling. So then he's showing up with I think you said, like a little bit of a shortcut to say, all right, here's what we're looking for. these guys said they noticed it. Here's a shortcut. And then we're going to get you in the cath lab. So that second appointment is the cath lab. The second appointment isn't an echo, which takes another 3 months to get you in the cath lab.
Right.
And from a hospital administration perspective, I mean, treating patients and ultimately intervening in cases like that is usually quite profitable for them. And if you can get people in who really need the care, which is good for the hospital, and probably just as importantly, grab the people who don't need the help. So the healthy patients who might eat up an hour of the cardiologist's time, who are in fantastic state, like if we can grab them and say, all right, we're okay. There's 100 people. Here's the 20 that need to be at the University of Kentucky. And here's the 80 that are just fine. And don't eat up time where you're only going to get $100 to chat with them and tell them, keep it up.
Right.
I think that's been of interest to some of the systems.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So, Chris, I've been watching wearable technology development for years. I starting with a family member years ago that had a suspected arrhythmia and had to wear one of those big black, box Holter monitors, right? And fortunately, they were okay. But watching where it's at now and how it's evolving, what do you see with some of the bigger opportunities in cardiac monitoring in the next 10 or so years? Can you give us any insights there?
Yeah, I think there's been lots of fantastic data that hospital at home actually improves recovery quite a bit. So I think where you started with hemodynamic monitoring and being able to give the patient confidence that, we can send you home to recover. It's not an emergency, and we're watching close enough to know if we need to intervene, but you don't need to sit in a hospital bed. I think that will be revolutionary because my family background, my grandpa was in and out of the hospital constantly as I grew up for heart failure, which means that my mom would then have to drive to Louisville and spend the night in the hospital. And if it was my mom as my carer, there was somebody there 24/7, which is maybe just a my family thing, but I suspect not. And it can be quite disruptive. So caring for my grandpa in that case at home would be fantastic. So I think that's quite big because I suspect most of the things that are happening today, arrhythmia detection as an example, which has been largely what cardiac monitoring has been used for today. I suspect as soon as Oura Ring and Apple want to shift into the prescription realm, they're getting quite close to taking over. So the consumer devices are quite sophisticated, even if they choose to just be consumer devices right now, which means the hardware in the prescription realm needs to get more sophisticated as well to be competitive. And the beauty of the more sophisticated is that's what's going to enable hospital home. That's what's going to enable early detection. So Apple's kind of pushing everybody forward, I suspect. I'm pretty optimistic.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. And I'm going to shift the conversation slightly here because one of the things that your team's been up to, securing investor funding, that's a major challenge for a lot of startups. I'm just kind of curious, what best practices have you seen or developed for raising capital and attracting strategic partners? Do you have any insights for gurus out there?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm by no means an expert here. I think in the medical device space, especially we start to commercialize, if you're going to go get growth funding, the playbook is relatively basic. It's show me how you get, in our case, show me how you get from one cardiologist to 6, and how do you get from a 10 patient pilot to 100 patients, and how do you get from, one HCA Florida site to 3 HCA Florida. So the growth funding has a little bit of a playbook to follow. The really hard part is I have no sales and need money to get to the point where I can do something. So I suspect a lot of that is based on team, I think. And there's no shortage of great ideas and no shortage of opportunities in the healthcare space. So is it a team that you can bet on? And then a lot of the questions that I field are focused on adoption. So my time spent with investors is usually assuring them, hey, we're not creating a new work, because they're in their head, they've seen so many companies, great technologies die because the MA doesn't love it, or you're asking for more steps, and there's no real reimbursement yet. So the more I've been able to kind of smooth the path of no workflow changes, reimbursement already exists, The ease of use is the same as our competitors. There's more utility. We can offer like this list of advantages. I think friction for launch is always key. And I feel for some of the people who are in a space where there is no reimbursement, because that's an even bigger path to cross. Finding the right investors is tricky. So I think a lot of them, they'll say, I want to change the world, until they realize there's no reimbursement code, then they're not really that interested in changing the world after all. So I'm afraid there's no quick win, but where I've been most successful is kind of convincing that like commercial path is essentially set. So now you're just betting on me building the product. And do you think I have the team that can build the product? So then now's a good time.
Well, I think too, I'm kind of thinking as you were explaining that, thank you for that answer. I was thinking about the fact that you rely on or have used some of the older publications, some of that older research, right? So in a sense, it seems to me you've got a partial solution that's already tried and true, and you're just enhancing that. Is that what you're finding? Are you getting that kind of feedback?
Yeah. The good and bad of a lot of our technology is that there's only so many quantum physics experts in the country that can really dive in and understand what's actually being done in the signal processing. So I think you're right. So in a case like that, you'd say, well, has it been used before? And you'd say, here's an example of the application in seismography to find oil wells in a subsea location in the Atlantic Ocean. You'd say, so if it can work in that context, now we're just applying it to a new context. And then you'd sit there and be like, okay, like it's not a complete invention out of nowhere where we're just betting on these guys and hope they're telling us the truth. There's actually some substance behind it, even if it hasn't been proven maybe necessarily in this context. I think that does make it a little bit more digestible.
Yeah, for sure. And you touched on payers, right? So, obviously they're always looking to reduce costs. So I'm wondering, how they can benefit from a technology like, the PeerBridge CoreMDX, right? And some of those early detections. Are they still given the same reimbursements, or are they benefiting from just keeping individuals out of the hospital that might have ended there? Can you give us some insights there?
Good question. So I think the groups that will benefit the most are a lot of the Medicare Advantage plan, because they're following the patient essentially through their life, and our ability to get out to these rural communities really inexpensively to find the disease and avoid the $15,000 ER visit and then the $12,000 readmission and the $12,000 readmission and the $12,000 readmission. If you can intervene with like I said, pretty generic, inexpensive pharmaceuticals, that's the play. And our goal is we need about 5 minutes of data. So we can do home sleep tests, but you'd have to do overnight. But everything else we can do with 5 minutes of data, which means that we can do essentially a whole cardiac function test for about $25, quite profitable. So then there's two ways we kind of think about doing it. One, wouldn't it be nice to have a primary care appointment? My dad's going in for his annual physical, rather than him lying for 30 minutes to the nice nurse who's asking lots of questions. Just put it on for 5 minutes and we'll get the ground truth of like, do we need to intervene or not? Or in a more broad context, if you go to a payer and say, hey, most likely give me 60 and older who's got hypertension and maybe a BMI of 25, send this device to them. And there's a 30% chance they have early stage heart failure. Pretty good chance. And we can find it really inexpensively and avoid this cost path. Not to mention, the stress it causes on the patient and the family and all these other things. But I think that's the biggest impact. Not necessarily where we're starting, because payers can be tricky because they want to see lots of data and prove it to me on all these populations. So we're starting with the cardiologist to build the data set and then go to them and say, this is something that needs to be in your patient's hands. But it feels like it's getting there. I mean, even I was driving to work today. There's a Medicare Advantage plan here in Tennessee that was offering $100 a month in like vegetables, fruits and vegetables as a stipend to their patients, which I think is brilliant. like exactly the spirit, I think, of what Medicare Advantage is going for, is let's keep people healthy. And this should just be another piece of that, is it be inexpensive, which is our whole goal. And you can find it early, treat it generically, and then keep people out of the hospital. That's a win all around.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So, Chris, this seems like a really exciting time for you and your team at PeerBridge. What's the future hold? Where do you go from here?
Good question. So we have about 30 indications we think we can do with the device. Anything from some are measurements like ejection fraction or cardiac output to kind of more of a screening tool for hypertrophic cardiomyopathy and heart failure and some more particular disease states. And of course, the FDA is keen on us demonstrating that we can do this at hospital level. And it's important for us for it to be hospital grade, not kind of, toyish, if we're really going to make an impact. So we're working very closely with them to work through trials to get them comfortable in the quality and the fidelity of the tool. So that'll be a couple year journey. And it's not all at once. So we'll do, pieces at a time as we continue to get more and more utility. Then we start commercializing. So this summer, we'll have the new device will be in production at a fantastic partner we have from a manufacturing perspective. And then we get it out in patients' hands. And we have a 15,000 patient trial, an IRB trial that allows us to give all 31 diagnostics now, so long as the patient is comfortable signing an informed consent. And of course, it's for investigative uses only. But I think we can save hundreds of thousands of lives, and that is maybe a little bit dramatic, but I'm more interested in like keeping people healthier. Like your 60s and 70s should be fantastic years of living your life, grandkids, and not worrying about hospitals. And my experience with all this is it's quite stressful for the families. Piles of bills, and you've got pill boxes is like as common at the kitchen table growing up at my grandma's house as anything else. And like, let's get rid of all of that. And the heart is a muscle. Inevitably, it's gonna age, and it's gonna be bad, and it'll need repair. But if we could push that out 20 years, but that's what I think about every day. We can do it. No shortage of work, for sure. Get there, but that's what I wake up for every day.
For sure, but it's for sure a worthwhile mission that you're on.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, Chris, first of all, I'd like to acknowledge and thank you for the time and preparation it took to be our guru today. If somebody wants to learn more, how do they find out about PeerBridge and what you got going on here yourself? Is there a website? You guys on LinkedIn? How do we find out more?
Yeah, LinkedIn for sure. PeerBridgeHealth.com has some of our announcements and a little more information on the product. Feel free to reach out to me directly anytime. It's just c.darland@PeerBridgeHealth.com. Always happy to talk to anybody, customers or investors or potential patients who would like to be part of the trial and learn more. I mean, there's lots of work to do, and for sure we're not doing it on our own. So always happy to talk.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So Chris, once again, thank you so much for your insights and input. We really appreciate your time today and being our guru.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to MedTech Gurus. I am Sylvester Harris, your MC. If you want to learn more about Tom and his consulting services, you can go to www.pctmedical.com or email Tom at tom@pctmedical.com. Now, I can be reached at Sylvester Harris, that's SylvesterHarris 5048@gmail.com, and I'd be pleased to discuss any voiceover work that you may want for your company or broadcast. Hey, thanks so much for listening, and catch us on the next episode of MedTech Gurus.